We will. Okay, hello, everyone. This is the Israeli-Palestinian Confederation simulation. We are simulating how a common government for the people of Israel and Palestine could function and make peace. We are proposing a creation of a common democracy, secular democracy for the people in Israel, the West Bank and Gaza, 14 million people. A democracy that will be based on secular principles with equality and for the people of Israel and Palestine together, so that it is understood. We are not proposing the dismantling of the Israeli or the Palestinian government. We are proposing a creation of a separate and independent secular government for the people of Israel and Palestine for the purpose of making peace. My name is Joseph Avisar, and you can email me at Joseph Avisar. You can email me. My email address is josephavisar@gmail.com. Our website is ipconfederation.org. If you go to our website, you'll see that it is in 3 languages: Arabic, Hebrew, and English. It has frequently asked questions, which explains how this common government will be created and how it will function. It will also have, you will be able to see the Constitution. The Constitution explains the 3 branches of government: a legislative, a executive, and a judicial branch for the whole area, a common government that will function and will be created simultaneously with the Israeli and the Palestinian government. We are not proposing to dismantle those governments, but it will be a government for the entire people of Israel and Palestine based on a common legislator, 300 parliament members, Palestinians and Israelis. And in order for them to pass any legislation, you will need 55% of the Palestinian parliament members and 55% of the Israeli parliament members to vote yes, and then it will be submitted to the Israeli and the Palestinian governments for veto. If they veto the legislation, then it's not going to pass. But if they do not veto the legislation, it will be the law of the land. And this is what we are simulating today. We are demonstrating how this common government will function, and hopefully we will answer all your questions. I just want to let you know that we have many recordings of previous simulations, and many of the questions that you may have been asked in the previous simulation. So I encourage you to watch the previous simulations. They are on our website and also on YouTube. Today's guest is Joseph Agassi. I am not sure he will come because I have been contacting him for the last hour, and he usually responds very quickly. I have not received a response, but I'm hoping that he is joining in nevertheless, because I think he would be a very important guest for us to have. Joseph Agassi is an Israeli professor of philosophy. His main interest is science, metaphysics, and politics. He studied under Karl Popper and taught at the London School of Economics, the University of Hong Kong, the University of Illinois, Boston University, New York University, and Tel Aviv University. He is critical of the settler movements and viewed the notion that Israel belongs to the Jewish people as a threat to its independence. He advocates for separation between the diaspora, Jewish population, and the state of Israel. His book, Liberal Nationalism for Israel, is available on Google Books and Amazon. So from what I understand, basically Joseph Agassi is against the Jewish law of return because he believes that it creates a conflict of interest for the state of Israel, and that it threatens the independence of the state of Israel. I met with him about 10 days ago, I would say, and we went over the IPC simulation. He was very, very interested, and I'm hoping that he would be here today, but I am, like I said, I called him several times this morning. He's not answering his phone. So I'm hoping for the best. Our next speaker will be Nurit Peled Elhanan. She is an education professor at the University of Jerusalem, and she will be coming in on January 22nd, 2023. She is Miko Peled's sister, and she's the daughter of Peled. I forgot his General Peled. I forgot his first name.
Mati Peled.
Oh, Mati Peled. Okay, and her daughter was unfortunately killed in a suicide bombing in Jerusalem. Our next, after that, we'll have Richard Falk, who is an international lawyer. He will be on February 5th of this year. As you may recall, he was scheduled to be a guest speaker before. He changed his mind about coming in, and now he accepted another invitation. I'm very appreciative that he agreed to come in and express his views. Our next speaker is Doron Navot. He is a political science professor. He specializes in Arab Israelis and Palestinians. He reports a lot on Israeli media, and he should be a very interesting guest. Then we have Rabbi Neil Thomas Daniel, who appeared years ago in one of our symposiums in Santa Monica, and Gilly Getz, who is a photojournalist with Combatants for Peace. That should be a very interesting pair. And then after that, we have Professor Igal Ben-Nun. He is an Israeli historian. He is of Moroccan descent. He specializes in the relationship between the Muslims and Jews, and about the Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. By the way, he appears a lot with Joseph Agassi in many of his symposiums, and you can see them on YouTube as well. We had many guests before: Gidon Levy, Peter Tatchell, Muhammad Mustafa Galal, Peter Beiner, Noam Chomsky, Dennis Ross, Alan Dershowitz, Cornel West, Daoud Kutab, Avram Borg, Noam Chomsky, Ofer Kasif, Gadi Balyansky, Aleph Bet Yoshua, Jonathan Kutab, Sami Smuha, Alon Ben Meir, Professor Shibli Telhami, Mona Ali Khalil, who is an international lawyer, John Quigley, who is a professor of law, Lawrence Wilkerson, who used to be the chief of staff for skip my, sorry, I'm having trouble with names. Remember a name, but I know he's on today. And Lawrence, if you can just tell us, General, you were the chief of staff for General
Colin Powell.
I'm sorry?
Colin Powell.
Colin Powell. Oh, yeah, I apologize. It's not
The late Colin Powell.
The late Colin Powell, yes. We had Muhammad Dajani, we had Robert Neiman, Paul Sham, Frankie Wilmer, and okay, Menachem Klein, Gidon Levy, we had them once and twice, and Ian Lustig, May Pundak, Aaron David Miller spoke, and Mordechai Kedar. And so all of these are available on YouTube, and we will send you links to all of these simulations. The simulation timeline is 120 minutes. We anticipate it to be 120 minutes. We have several segments, like we do with a Constitution, and then we will have a short conversation after each segment. Since we are not going to have a speaker today, we'll just have a conversation without the speaker, and question and answers. You can ask me or each other is fine, and then we'll have closing remarks. Let me play the video that explains what the IPC stands for.
The conflict between Israelis and Palestinians has endured for generations. And instead of time healing the wounds, it's only caused the anger to fester and the violence to grow. But what if there was a way to alleviate the tension? Something that may not outright solve every problem, but at least create a forum that encourages a peaceful compromise. Welcome to the Israeli-Palestinian Confederation, a common third government between the Israeli and Palestinian citizens, specifically designed to foster peace, tolerance, and economic prosperity between the two nations. Here's how it works. First off, both Israel and Palestine will keep their respective governments. Israel's Knesset and the Palestinian National Authority will remain unchanged. The Israeli-Palestinian Confederation, IPC, will be a third entity acting as a unifying agent between the two. The IPC will comprise 300 parliament members elected from 300 districts in Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza. Above them will preside a president and vice president, one Israeli and one Palestinian. In order for the IPC to pass a law, it will require a 55% majority from its Israeli representatives, as well as a 55% majority from its Palestinian representatives, thereby preventing either side from monopolizing the legislature. Of course, the IPC won't undermine the political power of either the Israeli or the Palestinian government. At any time, Israel or Palestine may veto a law passed by the IPC. If neither side vetoes, the law is passed. And the two nations are another step closer to resolution. Please help us make this a reality. The Israeli-Palestinian Confederation. We might speak different languages, but we all mean the same thing.
All right. So we usually have a pre-simulation survey. We ask you to vote at this time. Are you supportive of a common government for the people of Israel and Palestine? If you support, please vote yes. If you do not support, or if you are unsure, vote no, because it's either you support or you don't. If you're unsure, you are not sure, that means you are not supportive. So let's have as many people vote as possible. Give you a few more seconds. Okay, so I see, see more votes coming in. Okay, more votes coming in, good. So we have 23%, 23 out of 31, which is 72% yes. And 9 out of 32, I guess, one joined said no, and that's 28%. Okay, good. So we will conduct the same survey at the end of the simulation, and hopefully we'll see some changes. Okay, I hope everyone can see the results. All right. The objective of the simulation is to demonstrate how a common government could make peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians, but not only between the Israelis and the Palestinians, it's between the neighbors as well, including Israelis and Palestinians. We are not anti-Israeli or anti-Palestinians. We are pro-peace. Usually we have a speaker, but today I don't think we are going to have. So, but when we invite the speakers, we invite them to stress test our formula. We don't ask them to be pro or against the IPC. We are asking them to participate in a stress test, and we ask vigorous questions. We follow our own narrative. We are not pro-Israeli, pro-Palestinian. We do not see the conflict from the Israeli point of view or the Palestinian point of view, and we anticipate that when this government will be created, it will follow its own narrative. It's not going to be pro-Israel. It's not going to see the issue from Israeli side or Palestinian side, but it's going to see the resolution in terms of the entire population. We always expect rigorous discussion, but always with respect. We do not attack anyone on a personal level, and we try to be respectful, but rigorous discussion is good. We do not preclude other formulas, and we do not claim exclusivity. In fact, we encourage other formulas. We think our formula is the best, but we are not claiming that we are the exclusive formula. We do not preclude the Israelis and the Palestinian governments from reaching their own formula for peace. We think all avenues for peace are good, including other organizations or other individuals who have their own formula. Peace is the ultimate solution, ultimate goal. We will ask you as the audience to judge our plan based on these criteria. Could the IPC formula, the common government formula, could it attend peace? That's the main question. Is it implementable? In other words, even if it could make peace, is it possible to create? And if it is possible to create, is there a downside for either the Israelis or the Palestinians from implementing it? But we ask you to be fair, and we ask you not to judge it based on perfection. No formula, no peace plan, no plan ever is perfect. But we ask you to judge it in terms of what is the alternative, not what's perfect. Perfect is not a fair basis upon which to judge the plan. We are proposing legislation to show how a common government would function. We're not saying that that's what they will pass. We are not even recommending that that's what they will pass. We're just demonstrating how a common government could pass legislation, because one of the most important objection we get is that, hey, you can pass whatever you want, but the Israeli government and the Palestinian government are going to either ignore it or they're going to veto everything. And that's what we are trying to show, that they will not be easily able to ignore it or veto it. What we are showing is the tip of the iceberg. We have many, many legislations, but we are limited by time. We ask you to look at the big picture, avoid technical arguments. We are here to demonstrate the big picture. Technical arguments could be resolved, technical issues could be resolved if we accept the big picture. We're asking you to, during the simulation, to refrain from comments, but we are encouraging questions. Questions are good. So comments such as, this is unrealistic, Israel will never allow this to happen. Please wait to the end, or put that in the chat. We heard those comments many, many times before. They don't really have a constructive purpose at this time. They're just showing your personal doubt, which is fine, but we are aware of all these comments. Questions that you can ask. I'm just suggesting questions. Isn't it better to have a two-state first? Wouldn't one state make more sense? Is it realistic to separate religion from government in the Middle East? Is this proposal to dismantle the Jewish state? What gives this government legitimacy? What would Israel allow this to happen? Is there a precedent for this? Let me see, what's the last question? Could people from Hamas run? What would give this government teeth? These are all legitimate questions. I'm just suggesting that you may want to ask them during the simulation, but please refrain from comments. And questions you can ask at any time. In order to conduct the simulation, we ask you to accept certain facts and accept certain assumptions. The facts are that the Israeli prime minister represents Israeli only. The Palestinian leader represents Palestinian only. These are facts that we are asking you to accept as facts. However, we are also asking you to accept these assumptions as facts. In other words, we know that these assumptions are not facts, but for the purpose of this simulation, we're asking you to assume that they are facts. The first one is that we held an online election, meaning on the internet, election platform for voting for the period of the last 3 months, okay? So assume that the election ended today and we had an election, people were able to vote online in Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza for the last 3 months. That 14 million people were allowed to vote. That's again in Gaza, the West Bank, and in Israel. I also want you to assume, for purposes of this simulation, that 5 million people have actually voted. The 3 million Palestinians voted, the 2 million Israelis voted. That the president received 1.5 million votes. I want you to assume that me, Joseph, I was elected the president, and the vice president, a Palestinian lady, received 1.3 million votes, and we will rotate in 2 years based on the Constitution. Just so that it's clear, I am not intending to run for president. I am just playing president in this simulation in order to facilitate a discussion. This is not my intention to run for president, and I am not qualified under the Constitution to be the president. I also want you to assume that 300 parliament members were elected in the area of Gaza, Israel, and the West Bank, that each parliament member represents 47,000 people. So if you divide 300 by 14 million, you get 47,000. So each parliament member represents 47,000 people. So I'm going to ask you now, if you have any issues, please speak up. If you have any issues accepting those assumptions or you need clarification, because the entire simulation is based on the acceptance of these simulations. So don't be shy, speak up and ask whatever comes to your mind regarding these assumptions. I don't see any.
I have a question.
Yes.
The big problem I have being a political scientist is that I don't consider the Confederation Council that you refer to as a government. It cannot be a government because you can't have individual citizen represented by two governments at the same time. It's got to be something else. What I think it is a constituent assembly.
Well, there are this is not a government yet. We are electing a common government for the people of Israel and Palestine, which will be the only legitimate government for the area of Israel and Palestine, because the Israeli government is not the legitimate government for the entire area, and the Palestinian governments are not the legitimate governments of the entire area because they are not elected by Israelis and Palestinians. But please ask questions regarding the assumptions.
That's a question regarding the assumption that it's a government.
I'm
How do you
sorry,
resolve
what's the
that?
question?
Question is how there can be two governments for each individual citizen at the same time, because the Israelis have their own government and the Palestinians have their own government as well. And now you're proposing a second government for each, which is theoretically not possible. It's got to be something else other than a government. My proposition is that it's a constituent assembly, which is—
That's not a question about the assumptions, but the US government is a government with 50 other states. So the US,
US government was founded by a constituent assembly, as you know.
Okay.
That's the difference.
So we will have that's a technical, we could have if that's what it takes in your eyes, that could be done. That's not a big problem, but
yeah, it's not a big problem.
But you cannot say that you cannot be represented by two governments, because in the United States, there are 50 governments and an additional federal government.
No, in Canada, it's clearer, because we have provinces, but we don't have two governments for the same people. We have a provincial legislature, except for Quebec, where you have a national assembly. You see, it gets very complicated.
Look, I'm not here to argue. I'm asking.
No, it's no argument. It's a matter of clarification.
Well, okay, but I said, please keep this to questions, not comments. Any other questions? Questions, not comments, please.
Yuri is raising his hand.
Okay, Yuri, what is your question?
Yuri, you have to unmute.
Okay, so I believe that these assumptions are attainable because one day of war between Israel and Palestine is $100 million between Israel and Gaza. With $100 million, these assumptions are attainable. Okay, Henry Law Reyes, please speak. I do not see, I have the PowerPoint presentation in front of me. I don't really see I don't see the audience. I only have a little note. So Henry, do you want to ask a question?
Question is, how do you see the division of powers between the IPC and the two governments?
The IPC passes legislation by 55% Israelis, 55% Palestinian, and then it is submitted to the separate Israeli and Palestinian governments who have a veto power. If they veto, then it doesn't pass. If they do not veto, it's the law of the land.
I understood that because you explained that previously, but I ask, what is the division of powers? In other words, what is the scope of the jurisdiction of the IPC as compared with the two governments? A previous questioner used the Canadian example and said that there are certain divisions of powers between the Canadian provinces and the federal government. In the United States, there's certain division of powers between state powers and the federal government. I'm asking, how do you define the division of powers between the IPC and the Palestinian government and the Israeli government?
The IPC could pass any legislation it wants. It doesn't have any restriction on its power. The only restriction it has is the veto power by the Israeli and the Palestinian government if it violates their sovereignty. If the law doesn't violate their sovereignty, they do not have a veto power. And that will be next in the Constitution. Any other question?
John Mitchell and Henry Lowy.
Okay, John, could you ask your question, please?
Yeah, thanks, Joseph. Well, I really support the whole concept of the IPC. There is one major practical issue which is problematic, and it could well be quixotic in the sense that
Okay,
given-
can I stop you because I'm asking for questions, not comments.
yes,
We will have an opportunity for discussion at the end. We have a lot of business to do, and then a lot of the comments will be clarified.
Yeah, I'm coming to my question, Joseph.
Okay, what's your question?
Okay, given the option for each of the governments to apply their veto, perhaps the main issue with regards to the demographics of this whole program is the acceptance of, or the possibility of allowing the Palestinian refugees to re-enter.
John, what is your question?
Well, will that major issue, will it be practical to implement the return of the Palestinian refugees?
Okay, that's not a question about the assumption, okay? We will have, I'm asking questions about the assumption. We have issues to go through, and I am sure your issue will be clarified. But to answer your question, it's very simple. Every issue will have to be determined by 55% of the Israelis and 55% of the Palestinians, including the refugees, including the security, Jerusalem, all the issues. Any other issues, questions, please, about the assumptions, because we have a lot of business to run.
There is a fundamental question, which is a precondition, and that is that each national entity will want to have guarantees for its national identity before participating in such a council. That's a problem.
Okay, so at this time, we are asking you to choose your nationality for either Israeli or Palestinian, okay? You, the audience, we're asking, first of all, we need volunteers to be, we need someone to be the Prime Minister of Israel. Do I have the Prime Minister of Israel as volunteer? We have someone to volunteer to be a Minister of Israel, Prime Minister of Israel, please.
Len, what's keeping you?
John Mitchell?
No, I'm suggesting that Len Bennett takes prime ministership.
Okay, he did not suggest himself. Could someone volunteer to ask as Prime Minister of Israel?
I think Baruch Shalev.
Baruch Shalev?
Yeah, I think he said he raised his hand.
Okay, Baruch
Ah.
Shalev.
Yes, that's me. Hello, everybody. I raised my hand, first of all, about Professor Agassi. I talked with him several days ago, and he's fine today, and he was very fine when we were talking. So just to put away your worries, I see worries here. He's fine, Professor Agassi.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry?
Professor Agassi. Yeah, so that's one thing. The other thing I wanted actually to ask you a question, if it's still valid, a real question, not an assumption.
No, we
is-
have to move on because this is,
Okay, good. So,
this is a
you know what?
simulation. It's not a discussion. It's not a lecture.
So I'm
Do
willing
I
to
have,
be the,
do I
I'm willing
have
to be the Prime
a
Minister.
volunteer to be the Prime Minister
Okay.
of Israel?
I volunteer, I agree to volunteer to be the Prime Minister of Israel.
Okay, and what is your name?
My name is Baruch, which means blessed, and Shalev, which means peaceful.
Baruch Shalev. Okay.
Baruch
do we
Shalev.
have- Do we have a Hamas
Sure.
leader?
Yes, I can do that. Abraham Weisfeld, doctor.
זה בדיוק זה. מגיע לי.
Okay, do we have a PA?
Yes, I saw it before. Yeah.
Do we have a volunteer to be a PA leader? Palestinian Authority. I need a volunteer for Palestinian Authority. The rest of you will represent a district, either Israelis or Palestinians, if you choose. You don't have to, but we're asking that you choose to do that, okay? So to help you do that, I'm asking you to choose an area. Here is a map, either in Israel or the West Bank and Gaza, and you choose whether you want to be a Palestinian or an Israeli parliament member based on the map. And I may ask you, what is your district that you represent? Now, remember, some of the district may be a mixed districts, okay? They're not necessarily Israeli or Palestinian. They may be a mixed district. You can choose to be this, but I'm asking for you to have an intellectual honesty and remain in your capacity as either Palestinian or Israeli parliament member. So let's take a sample vote. Let's have the Palestinian parliament members just vote.
Do we
yes.
have a PA leader though?
Do you want to be the PA leader?
Okay, I'll volunteer to be the PA leader. This is Charles.
Charles, okay. Let's have the Palestinian vote, just so that we see how many we have. Just vote yes, so we see how many Palestinian parliament members we have. Okay. I see we have 9 Palestinian parliament members, and let's have Israeli parliament members vote. And remember your district, what city or village you represent. So we have 9 Palestinians and 7 Israelis. Terrific. Okay, let's go on. We are going to ratify the Constitution. Libby, would you be so kind as to read out the Constitution?
We believe that Palestinians and Israelis are entitled to equal rights under the law and guaranteed human rights and freedom. The Israeli-Palestinian Confederation does not intend to supersede or supplant the Palestinian or Israeli governments, nor to abrogate or undermine any agreements between those governments. We recognize the need to work with the Israeli and Palestinian governments. Our purpose is to resolve conflicts and to expand the relationship between Palestinians and Israelis in a fair and equitable manner. We believe in equal rights under the law, guaranteed human rights, and freedom for all. We voluntarily give the legislatures and the governments of Israel and Palestine veto power over legislation we pass relating to the domain of control of those governments. We believe in the separation of power between the legislative, executive, and judicial branches. We believe in the creation of a permanent secular government for all the people residing in Israel and Palestine. We believe in having a separate judicial branch relating to IPC legislation with Israeli and Palestinian judges, with a system to avoid biased decisions based on nationality.
Thank you. So this Constitution that you have in front of you is just a short version of the long Constitution that is on our website. It basically says that the common government does not intend to interfere between any agreements between the Israelis and the Palestinian governments, and not to abrogate them. Whatever the Israeli and the Palestinian governments agree between themselves, we are constitutionally prohibited from undermining. And we specifically say that we recognize the governments of Israel and Palestine, and we give them veto power over legislation which over legislation that is interfering with their sovereignty. So any questions regarding this constitution?
Yes, I've just written it up. As Hamas rep,
Jay,
This
you
is,
want to ask a question?
I think this
Yes,
fits
the
in
next-
here.
Yes, the next to the last point, that we believe in the creation of a permanent secular government for
Yeah.
all the people. Now, as a member of the Israeli Knesset from Tel Aviv, I must be very concerned with this because of the religious community in my city. It is very strong with the Shah's party, with many Orthodox, fundamentalist, conservative
What is your question?
Judaic. How can that be in any way compatible with the interests of my religious constituency?
It is not. We are a separate government. We have nothing to do with your government and with your Shas party. We are a different, independent and separate government. Any other questions?
Yes, that's precisely the question of the separation of powers, or, national identity being guaranteed,
What is the question?
this constitution here. So the question that I presented in the chat already, it's written up. It says, as Hamas rep, we demand the national cultural autonomy of the Palestinian people and so call for the right of return under such autonomy.
Dr. Weisfeld, what is the question?
This is a proposition of amendment to the Constitution. This is the
Okay,
question.
okay, you'll
do we
have to
support
send
this
me,
or not?
you'll have to send me the amendment. The question is,
It's
do
written
you
there.
have questions regarding the Constitution in front of you?
Yes, it's missing this provision. National cultural
Can I just interject here and say that, Abraham, if you are acting as the Hamas leader, you do not have the,
You
you
don't
are
have
not,
the
you are not
jurisdiction as Hamas.
participating directly in the IPC. Same goes with Jay's question. If he's considering himself a member of the Knesset, I mean, are you speaking as a parliament member of the IPC, or are you a member of the Israeli parliament? There's a
Yes,
difference
you-
there. And these questions pertain to the IPC Confederation, not to
Well,
other
as
governments.
Joseph knows, we have a veto. We are a veto.
Yeah, you do not have a veto over the Constitution. The Constitution does not interfere with your jurisdiction. We can pass the legislation without giving you the veto power, whether or not you agree or do not agree with it.
Okay, you just said our jurisdiction. Okay, we agree with this. We call our jurisdiction in political science terms, national cultural autonomy. This is a Bundes formulation. And
No,
so
The
we would
the way,
ensure
the way we define jurisdiction is if we need your, if we need your help, if we need your assistance in order to implement the legislation, then we give you a veto power. We do not need your help or assistance in passing the legislation. You are a separate government and it does
Okay.
not interfere with your government. We
okay,
can pass the legislation, and this is the constitution that we pass, and we do not need the Israeli or the Palestinian or the Hamas veto. We do not give you a veto because we can pass the legislation regardless of whether or not you agree.
yes.
We don't need your assistance in implementing the Constitution. This is our Constitution.
Agreed. And we assume the authority to govern ourselves with our
Look,
own
I really
government.
don't, I
We
really,
call for-
look,
we
I
will-
don't want to participate in a lot of discussions. I am looking for
It's
real.
crucial. This is fundamental to Palestinian participation. You will know that, we require the authority to have the right of return for the Palestinian people, just as the Israeli government claims
Yes,
to have a right of
yeah,
return.
look,
for- right?
keep the comments to the end. We are looking for a good faith discussion here, and we're looking for good faith questions.
Okay,
And you are
So,
constantly
proceed.
bringing up comments in violation of what I am instructing people to do in order to conduct a simulation.
We can
And
proceed
yes,
with
it's
the
not,
simulation. Yes.
you're not being fair in this discussion. We want to have we want to demonstrate what we are doing. I told you at the beginning that we want questions, not comments, and you keep ignoring this.
Well, the question is whether the right of return is recognized or not.
Okay.
You know,
You
like
are
that's,
just putting your
yeah.
comments in terms of question, and that's not being fair.
Okay, but it's not addressed here. So we have to assume in proceeding together
Sir,
that
I am going
the
to block you if
Palestinian
you
government
continue.
has a
Look,
right
I'm giving you
to,
one warning. If you continue with this, we are going to block you. Okay?
I'm not, you know, asking for anything, just stating that
Yeah.
as the government of the Palestinians,
You are interfering with our simulation, and one more time, I'm going to instruct Dan to block you.
this is a
Joseph,
simulation. Because
Joseph,
we
can
assume the
I
right of
clarify
No,
return.
something for
I need to move
Abraham?
on. We are not
So-
going to be kidnapped by this person.
I'm not kidnapping anybody.
Dan, can you
So
please block
I'm
Dr.
insisting on the right of
Weisfeld?
return for the
Dan, can you
Palestinian
please,
refugees.
can you please stop him from being able
I
to?
muted you, Dr. Weisfeld. Please just listen for now. And then at
Okay.
the end of the simulation, we'll have comments section and you can make comments.
Any questions? Okay, hearing no questions, let's take a vote. Could we have the Palestinian parliament members vote on ratifying the Constitution? Okay, publish the vote. 100% of the Palestinian parliament members voted to ratify the Constitution. Let's go to the Israeli parliament members. Please vote. Israeli, do you ratify the Constitution? Okay, can you publish the vote? 100% of the Israeli parliament members voted in favor of the Constitution. Congratulations, we have a Constitution. This is the first Constitution that was ever passed in the history of the Middle East for a secular constitution for the Israelis and the Palestinians. Congratulations to all of us. This is a historical, this is a historical moment. Questions that have arisen: would Israel or Hamas object, or the PA, to this? And first of all, they don't really have a reason to object if they are in favor of peace, but they are not going to be they're not going to be able to articulate a reason. And the Israelis and the Palestinian societies are not a monolithic societies. So I believe that we will be able to reach the 5 million if we have 100% awareness. Neither one of these governments have a legal authority to object or the moral authority to object, and may lose legitimacy if they object. And they never attempted to disrupt this before. And yes, they did have an opportunity to disrupt this before. We had an election on December 12, 2012 before, the same as being proposed. We had a full page ad in the New York Times and that appeared on October 1st, 2012, needed announcing the election. This is real, not simulated, real, and neither government have attempted to disrupt. And we did have the election and people voted, but clearly it wasn't enough votes. I think we got the total of 900 candidates and 600 votes, but there was no attempt to disrupt by the Israeli or the Palestinian governments. The next issue is granting a veto power to the separate governments. So this is a legislation that is, does not require giving a veto power to the Israeli or the Palestinian government because this is our own internal legislation. Libby, could you please read the veto power legislation?
The Confederation is the government of the entire population of Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza. We hereby bestow a veto power relating to legislation affecting sovereignty to the following: the government of Israel, the Palestinian Authority, Hamas. And in the event of changes in government, this legislation may be amended or repealed.
Okay, does anyone have any questions regarding this legislation? Remember, we already passed a constitution. Now we are deciding who to give a veto power. And this is what we are being asked to vote on. Does anyone have any questions? John, please ask your question.
Yeah, if we're going to have two governments contributing towards the Confederation, that would assume from a Palestinian side.
Could you ask a question regarding this veto power?
Joseph, give me a second, please.
No, we cannot enter into discussion. We have an agenda. I am sorry, this is a simulation. This is not a lecture. We will have a comment at the end. Do you have a question?
Yes, I do have a question.
What is your question?
Giving you the background to my question.
No, I don't need a background. Just ask the question.
Right, I'm going to ask the question, Joseph. You're in a hell of a mood today. Okay, give me a second, please. Look, if we have two governments contributing towards a confederation, then presumably that election in the Palestinian side of things will have one government.
I am sorry, you are not asking a question regarding this veto power. We have a lot of business to do, and you are also being disruptive.
No, I'm not, Joseph.
Yes,
Joseph,
you are. You are, because I asked, do you have a question regarding this veto power legislation? Not about anything else. Okay?
Why do we give?
You need to respect. You need to respect our process. It is
Joseph,
not. We created a process. We went through the time of creating a process. It's not for you to come in the middle and kidnap it into another discussion.
Joseph,
okay?
why do
you
we
need to respect what we are doing, and you are not being respectful.
Right? Why do we give the veto power to Hamas? Presumably,
because that's a fair question. Because if we do not give a veto power to Hamas, we will not be able to implement our legislation in Gaza. Hamas is in control of Gaza. The same thing, the same reason we give veto power to the government of Israel and the PA. Any other questions?
Yeah, Joseph, let me come back to this, please.
No, I'm not going to argue with you. I am the president. I was elected president, and I am proposing legislation. You asked me a question, I answered it. Let's move on. Any other questions?
I have a question on the veto question.
Yes, please.
Okay, are we using the word veto and just saying each entity decides that in their own way, or are we saying that there has to be some kind of an internal process of each entity to arrive at a veto?
It is up to them. They will let us know if they vetoed it. We are not controlling those separate governments. They will let us know if they are vetoing or not. And they have 60, as I recall, 60 days to let us know if they're vetoing it or not. But in this case, they don't have a veto power. Okay? This is our internal mechanism. We decide who to give the veto power to.
Okay, so they each decide on their own how they're going to do it. Okay.
Exactly. Any other questions? Okay, let's have a vote. Palestinian parliament members, please vote. I know we have more. We need one more vote. Okay, publish the vote. 100% of the Palestinian parliament members voted yes. And let's have the Israeli parliament members please vote on this legislation. Publish the vote. 100% of the Israeli parliament members voted on this legislation. Thank you so much. We already decided. Let's go to the first legislation. This legislation will be subject to veto. Libby, would you be so kind as to read this legislation out loud, teaching tolerance and understanding?
Both educational systems to teach tolerance in their public schools. Devote a certain number of hours for both sides to teach the history of the Israelis and the Palestinians. Prioritizing teaching Arabic and Hebrew in public schools to achieve proficiency of both languages by Israeli and Palestinian students. Create a mutual task force to ensure the teaching of both languages. Educators to draft textbooks together and arrange for a regular exchange of teachers. Public media on both sides to provide fair and equal coverage daily for teaching tolerance. IPC as a facilitator to ensure that both sides are fairly represented. And we hereby submit this legislation to the Israeli government, the Palestinian government, and Hamas. We bestow upon them a veto power, which may be exercised in the next 60 days.
Okay, before we take a vote, we do not have a Hamas leader because we muted Abraham. Is anyone willing to be a Hamas leader? Do we have a Hamas leader?
We resign from the Confederation then.
I'm sorry?
I said we resign. Hamas resigns. Bye.
The Hamas is not part of the Confederation. I'm sorry. You were not part of the Confederation to begin with. You part of Hamas. Do we have?
I could do it, but I am a Palestinian.
Okay, we do not have a Hamas leader then.
Okay.
All right. Let's have the Palestinian. Any questions regarding this legislation?
I think Sean should be representing Hamas.
You are Shlomo?
No, Sean Zahir.
Sean?
I suggest that Sean Zahir will represent Hamas.
Okay, Sean, are you willing to represent Hamas?
Yes, if there's no other person, then yeah, I'll represent Hamas.
Okay, great. Thank you, Sean.
Yeah.
All right, let's have any other questions on this tolerance and understanding on the legislation? Okay, let's vote. Palestinian parliament members, please vote. Okay, publish the vote. 100% of the Palestinian parliament members voted in favor of this legislation. Let's have the Israeli parliament members please vote. Okay, publish the vote. 90% of the Palestinian parliament, of the Israeli parliament members voted in favor of this legislation. Let's go now to the Israeli Prime Minister. Mr. Prime Minister, are you going to veto this legislation? Israeli Prime Minister.
Baruch Shalev, no?
Yes.
You
what is
mean
the question?
PA?
No, Baruch Shalev is
sorry,
a
Israeli.
Israeli Prime Minister.
Yes.
Are you going to veto this legislation?
No, I'm not going to veto it.
Okay, let's go to the PA leader.
No. No, I'm
Okay,
not going to veto.
and let's go to the Hamas leader.
No,
Okay,
I'm not
great.
going to veto it.
All right, thank you. So this legislation passed. And let's go to the next legislation, converting Kalanga Checkpoint into an education and commerce center. Libby, would you be so kind as to read this legislation?
Located on the main road between Ramallah and Jerusalem. Convert the checkpoint into an education and commerce center. Construction of state-of-the-art hospital. Reduce unnecessary hardship and congestion at the checkpoint without increasing security risk. Convert the entire area into an education and commercial zone. Expansion of the number of entrances and exits. Fast lane for frequent travelers. Managed by the Confederation Police Force. We hereby submit this legislation to the Israeli government, the Palestinian government, and Hamas. We bestow upon them the power which may be exercised in the next 60 days.
Any questions regarding this legislation? Okay, hearing no question, let's have the Palestinian parliament members please vote. Please publish the vote. 9 out of 9. I believe we have 11, but that's okay. It's more than 55% voted yes. Let's have the Israeli parliament members please vote. Okay, publish the vote. 100% of the Israeli parliament members voted in favor of this. So we are basically trying to show how the common government could function. We have one more legislation before we go to a discussion, and that's about Gaza and Israel. We usually have a legislation about joint economic zone. This time we have a little different. So we had before joint economic zone on Israel-Palestine, between Gaza and Israel to create a international seaport and airport, etc. But we have a different legislation regarding Gaza and Israel. The purpose is, if you see, this is what Gaza, the border of Gaza and Israel look like. It's actually a beautiful, beautiful area, but it is, as you can see, it looks like almost like a military zone. So we want to change this area from looking like this to looking like this. Okay, and we want to change it from looking like this, where snipers are shooting at Palestinians, demonstrators, to looking like this. So we want to create a Gaza-Israel Disney. I am the president, and I want to create a Gaza-Israel Disney because I feel that it would help the employment. It will help in tremendous employment. Will bring employment back to 100% in Gaza and in Israel. It would be a tremendous economic boost to the area. It would bring a lot of goodwill and integration between Palestinians and Israelis, and would bring tremendous amount of international goodwill into the area. So we want to change it from this to this. And so this is the legislation that I am asking you to okay. And it's not, so this is a Gaza-Israel Disneyland authorization. So I am the president. I am asking you, the government and the parliament, to give me a authorization. Libby, could you please read it?
The Israeli Palestinian Parliament, the Israeli government, Hamas government, and the Palestinian Authority hereby authorize the President of the Israeli-Palestinian Confederation to commence negotiations with the Disney Corporation to construct a Gaza-Israel Disneyland at the border between Gaza and Israel. We authorize IPC President to make the following representation on our behalf. 1, we agree to allocate a substantial area to the Disney Corporation to construct the Gaza-Israel Disneyland. We agree that Gaza and Israel will each allocate 50% of the land and will each provide equal number of employees. We agree to halt all military hostility and guarantee that Gaza, Israel, Disneyland, I guess, some words are covered, be protected from any violence. Gaza, Israel, Disney will be part of the IPC Joint Economic Zone.
So basically, I am asking you to give me authorization to go to the Disney Corporation and represent that to them that the Israeli and the Palestinian and the Hamas government agree to have a Gaza-Israel Disneyland. So let's have, does anyone have any questions before we take a vote and before we ask the Israeli and the Hamas and the PA leader whether they give me that authorization? Does anyone have any questions? Hearing no questions, let's have the Palestinian parliament members. Do you agree with this legislation? Do you agree to give me authorization? Okay, let's share the results. 9 out of 10 agreed, that's 90%. Let's have the Israeli parliament members vote. Do you agree to give the president this authorization? Okay, let's publish the results. 82% of the Israelis agreed to give me this authorization. Now we need authorization from the Prime Minister of Israel. Mr. Prime Minister, are you going to give the authorization to the president of the IPC, to me, to negotiate with the Disney Corporation?
I want to add a sentence of appreciation for this initiative, and as a goodwill from our part, I'm going to the land that I was going to take from the south of Hebron for the army to practice. I'm going to let this idea go. In other ways, leave it for the Palestinians and go to Cyprus to do the military practices there, as it's much easier for defending the country. And it's showing a sign of good wish and appreciation for this beautiful initiative that you suggested.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
are you giving me the
Yes.
authorization?
Yes, you have the authorization.
Thank you. Let's go to the Hamas leader. Mr. Hamas leader, are you giving me the authorization for this to go to the Disney Corporation and negotiate?
Yes, because if it can lessen tension between the two nations, then yes.
Okay. And what about the PA leader? Are you giving me the authorization?
With great, yeah, I'm giving you the authorization. Let's go for it.
Okay, you were going to add something after the word great, but
Yeah, like whoopee.
okay. All right. So let's conduct a post-simulation survey, and then afterwards we will have a discussion. After participating in the simulation, do you support a common government for the people of Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza that will coexist with the Israeli and Palestinian governments? Please vote. That's the total, all of you voting now. Okay, publish the vote. 95% support. 5%, which is really one person, oppose. We started with 72% for 72% support. It went up to 95%. 28% opposed. It went down to 5%. So I think we have done a good job of demonstrating how this thing will work. And now let's open up for discussion. And you can have your comments now or whatever you want. John.
Yeah, I want to go back to my attempt at getting my question in prior. If there's going to be two governments, the Israeli government and the Palestinian government contributing towards the confederation, if the PA had gone back to their, their legal aspect of having an election, there wouldn't be a separate Hamas government. There would be a Palestinian government. So I don't think there should be a separate Hamas government as opposed to the PA government. And of course, as we know, Abbas has refused to have an election, which is totally wrong. So I would wipe out. No, sorry, I'll not use that word. I would cancel the option or the alternative of having a separate Hamas government.
Okay, well, we deal with reality. We do not deal with what could happen or what should happen. We deal with reality. And the reality is that I believe the Palestinians did not have an election since 2006. They are based on our observation and our determination, Hamas is in control. And I am the president of the whole area. I want to benefit the 2 million people of Gaza. And because of that, I have to cooperate with Hamas and I have to seek their cooperation. If we tell Hamas, if we ignore Hamas, or if we ignore the Israeli government, if we ignore the Palestinian government, we're making ourselves useless. So we deal with reality. The reality is that we have these entities to deal with. Like I said, in my opinion, none of these entities are legitimate because the Israeli government is not elected by the Palestinian people whom it controls. The Palestinian governments are not elected by the Israelis or the Palestinians. So they are not. We will be the only legitimate government for the area, but we have to deal with reality. Charles?
Yeah, I think people get confused about the exercise of power that the IPC actually has. I mean, like, if you're the United States government and you have the largest military in the world, and you think that a little government somewhere is not doing what you want, you may have the ability to undermine them or overthrow them or invade them. But if I'm somebody who wants to go into a borough of New York and there's a mob boss that controls that borough, and I think I'm going to be able to build something without getting the consent and approval and cooperation of that mob boss, then I'm obviously going to have problems. So I think the latter kind of analogy is more appropriate to view the IPC through than the former one. The idea that the IPC would be some kind of government over the existing power structures that could enforce its will on them is not the kind of power that the IPC has. And it does have power. It has soft power. But you know, and the exercise, the problem that people have with the simulation is they keep expecting the IPC to act like a government that has hard power. But what we demonstrate through the simulations is that soft power can be very effective. So I just thought
Yeah.
I'd throw that out there.
I don't think you want to go to someone, even if you deep down do not respect him, and say, well, let me deal with you because you're a mob boss and I have no choice. You want to show respect, even if you do not respect, because you want to reach results.
Right.
Now, you're speaking about, to me, the bigger question is soft power. All democracies have soft power. Democracy, the essence of democracy is that it has soft power given to it. They are given legitimacy. And because they are given legitimacy, they develop hard power. They develop police, but they all start with soft power. They all start, they don't go and with guns to force people to vote for them. They ask for legitimacy first, and we're asking for legitimacy first too. So the problem we have is we have not really been involved when the US government has been created, or the Israeli government has been created, or any other democracy has been created. We are being asked to make decisions based on the creation of a democracy, just like our forefathers did 100 years, 200, 500 years ago. And they had the intellectual ability to understand the power of the people that would bring to what you call hard power. We are spoiled. We are already take it for granted, but they went through this problem 100 years, 200 years ago, just so that, but there is no difference. The IPC will be the same as it was as other democracies before. Jay, you need to unmute.
Ignoring the religious communities in our conversations by simply saying it will be a secular operation, that's fine and good as far as it goes. The problem is that the religious communities will not remain silent in regards to rules and arrangements that are made. We've heard all kinds of stories how the religious community, particularly the very conservative religious communities, are very intolerant of certain secular cultural practices, whether it's the gay community in Tel Aviv, whether it's redefining the law of right of return to be an immediate mother-father, which is currently happening, and other vested interests of the religious community. I'd like to hear from people in the community here in our simulation, how they feel they will be able to deal with the religious communities of all interests.
Well, this is, the United States deals with religious communities all day. I live in a religious neighborhood. We don't have any problem with the government. There are religious communities on both sides, the Palestinians and the Israeli side. In my opinion, the religious communities would respect the common government as a secular government much better than the religious Jewish community in a Jewish state. In a Jewish state, they have a stake. They feel like they are part of the DNA of a Jewish state, but they are not part of the DNA of a secular common government. There are religious Orthodox Jews and there are religious Orthodox Muslims on both sides. Give me an example of why do you think the religious Orthodox or Jewish or Muslim community will run afoul with the IPC.
Well, it just stands to reason that,
Give me an example.
let's say Saturday. Saturday is the religious day of observation. In a secular society, many people will say, the hell with it. I'm not recognizing Saturday as my religious day. In fact, I'm an atheist or I'm agnostic or I'm some other religion that has nothing to do with Saturday being religious day. And if I want to sell donuts on the side of the road, I don't want some Orthodox fundamentalists coming and grabbing all the donuts and throwing them out on the dirt, which has happened numerous times. And many other examples.
But okay. What you are referring to is within the Israeli and the Palestinian internal community. We are not replacing the Israeli or the Palestinian internal community. 80% of the Jews in Israel are secular. And the issues that you are pointing are point of collision between the Jewish secular and the Jewish Orthodox community. But I'm asking you, give me an example. How would it, what would be the collision between the Orthodox Jews or Orthodox Muslim and the IPC? Why do you see that as more of a problem?
I think the religious community would say we have our vested interest. The Shah's party in particular gets large financial contributions constantly from the Israeli government. They're part of the Knesset, they're part of Netanyahu's coalition, and they will feel threatened by a non-religious entity making rules and regulations in particular that would threaten their financial benefits that they've received. I think that
how would the IPC contradict their interest in any way?
They would be simply saying we're a secular society, so that I mean a secular or operation. On the face of it, no.
Give me an example, because you're being very, very vague. Because give me a specific example that the IPC would run afoul of the Israeli Orthodox, or as you refer to specifically, the Shas community, or the Muslim Orthodox community. Give me an example, because I think it would actually enhance. It would give them more opportunity to go and pray in peace. It would give them more opportunities for more Muslims and Jews to arrive to the area. It would give the area a lot more religious significance for the whole Jewish and Muslim and Christian community. So I think it would just be the opposite. But give me an example of.
I'm saying that the issue is much larger than whether you worship on a different place or different time. There are basic financial interests here that the whole yeshiva university system is based on government financial support. Nobody has to serve in the military. They all get paid money, et cetera, et cetera. Same thing goes for give me one reason
why the Shas party will receive less money because of the IPC.
They'll be spending it on other things, like anything else they fight and argue about.
Who is going to spend it on other things?
Well, if you want to redo that checkpoint idea, for instance, that's going to be hundreds of millions of dollars to build that.
By the IPC, it's not by the Israeli government.
Okay. Well,
are you saying that the Israeli government will have an additional expense because of the IPC?
Yeah, they might have to set up a security checkpoint half a mile one side of the other.
The IPC is a totally different entity. It's not the Israeli government.
Okay. Well, I totally remain unconvinced that the religious community sit by and watch these things happen without being very upset.
Next time, give me a specific example, because I think it would actually give a lot more religious freedom to Jews, Christian, and Muslim. It would enhance the religious significance of Israel, Palestine, and it would increase the economy without affecting 1 inch the Israeli or the Palestinian society, specifically in a negative way. So, but that's our point of view. Let's go to Libby. Hi, Libby.
Hi. Yeah, my comment is kind of related and not necessarily, but it kind of goes back to the founding of our country and our Constitution and where we are today. Just to point out that when our country was founded, it was founded by white Christian men. And today we live in a different world. We live in a much more diverse country. Many people from other countries have moved to America with their various religions and backgrounds, and we struggle with it, and we're struggling with it today. And I think sort of the same thing can be said about many countries in the Middle East, especially Israel, Palestine. And for me, the issue, not necessarily about religion, it's much more about power and who has the money, who's in control, who gets to make the decisions and everything. And so at the more people there are, the more we're fighting over restricted territories, the more the planet is being decimated, and we're fighting to meet our daily desires and using up the resources of the planet. We're going to be struggling more and more about who gets what. And sometimes religion is used as an excuse. But I agree with Joseph that I think that if we figure out if we understand that we're all in it together and that we have to share resources and that we are responsible for the climate crisis, and we must figure out how to live together, then religion and business and all the other issues could begin to be taken care of. But right now we're struggling almost for survival. And I think, honestly, it's going to get worse before it gets better unless we figure out how to respond to all the current challenges we're up against. So yes, religion has always played a heavy role, but behind the religions, I always have felt like it had to do with power. When I think about the Catholic Church and the huge amounts of money and the incredible poverty of many of the believers, power's the number one thing. We have to figure out how to meet the needs of everybody. And I'm not talking about communism or necessarily socialism. I'm talking about fairness and justice and meeting the needs of everybody. So this is an example, to me, the Confederation, of how to do that, how to build a community where everybody is included and everybody gets to participate in making the decisions and figuring out the best way to have relationships so everybody has their basic needs met. And I think it's fantastic. And we have to really work with it instead of saying this won't work and that won't work because the same old things don't work. No, we have to think new. We have to think outside the box. We have to be willing to let go of the old and see what's going to benefit everybody in the new.
Yeah, well, I agree with you. When I'm listening to you, what we have now between the Israelis and the Palestinians is fighting over crumbs, both sides. Instead of doing that, let's just expand and make the pie much, much bigger so everyone can enjoy it. That's what the IPC does. It makes the pie bigger for everyone to enjoy rather than fighting over crumbs.
Right.
All right, Charles, let's Don speak and then you, okay? Don.
Okay, thank you. I have a question regarding the veto power. In the simulation, there was no vetoes, but in reality, there could very well be vetoes quite often. So what would be the impact on that, on the legislation that the IPC passes? And a corollary question on that is, assuming it was not, these legislations were not vetoed, where's the financing coming from for an IPC government?
Okay, very excellent question. first of all, the veto, the whole idea is to create a scenario where the Israeli and the Palestinian governments will lose legitimacy if they veto. If the common government is the parliament, 300 parliament members that have been elected by 5 million people, if they are able to reach a legislation that benefits everyone, then the Israeli government, the Palestinian government, the Hamas government will not be able to veto it if it benefits their people, because they will lose legitimacy. The next question you ask is, where are the finances are going to come? There are two steps. The first step is to create the election. And the second step is, once the government is created, where the funding will come. I think that the first part is really the most difficult part, because if the common government is having an election, we can have, and we have 5 million people voting, we can basically get grants from all over the world, from countries all over the world. And we have done simulations on that, and we got billions of dollars in simulation, not real life. But where is the $100 million is going to come from to do the election? And that's the difficult part. And before we get the $100 million to have the election and to have the government run for several years, we need to have awareness of that possibility. We need to have a media coverage, and that's going to be one of my. If we have media coverage, if we have an awareness, if the New York Times write about it, if the LA Times write about it, about options for peace, then we will have awareness. We will have several hundreds of thousands of people are aware of it, and they will be able to finance the election and to come up. $100 million is a lot of money for you and me, but it's not a lot of money if there is a huge public awareness of it.
But just a quick question, if we pass, the IPC passed legislation to convert a checkpoint into an economic and educational zone, and it was vetoed, then that legislation cannot be enacted.
Correct. Correct. If it's vetoed, it's not the law. It's the whole purpose is, like Charles said, it has soft power. It has the power of the brain, not the power of the gun.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let's go to Charles and then Shlomo. Or is Charles gone? Okay, Shlomo Orr, please.
A practical question about the boundaries. You show the map with two states, with pre-67, which I agree to, but do you think the Israeli government, when talk about the Palestinians, so boundaries is a question, and another question is,
what's the first question?
So, what are the boundaries? Are these the boundaries that you show on the map? Are these the boundaries? I mean, that both the Israeli government, the Israeli government will agree?
We're not asking the Israeli government. The map that I am showing is only to facilitate this discussion, to help people choose their districts, okay? These are not, this is not a decision by the IPC or by the future government about boundaries. In fact, the common government doesn't care about boundaries. It cares about people. And the people are in Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza. That's it. So a lot of districts will cross boundaries. In other words, northern Gaza may have the same district as southern Israel. You know, the boundaries are, the map that I showed is just to facilitate a discussion.
Okay, good. Good. There are, of course, many hidden assumptions, and one of them that you even mentioned that Israeli government want peace, which is not, unfortunately, is not the case, and therefore they will not like the idea, and they would veto almost everything.
All right, well, let me respond to that. I agree with you that they don't want peace, okay? But before they get the opportunity to veto, there has to be an election. Okay, these are two different steps. The first step is to have the election. I agree with you that the Israeli government, and by the way, the Palestinian government also do not want peace, in my opinion, but it doesn't matter. But let me ask you this, what would be how would they articulate, what would be their explanation against the common government?
They would not want any other third body to interfere with their affairs, and for them, anybody that start to promote.
I'm asking for their explanation. What would be their explanation?
Okay, the official explanation, yeah.
Yes.
I have to think about it. I'm not sure. They will of course lie and
Look, and then I'm sure they'll come up. It's very easy to come up with verbiage to explain anything. Okay, I agree with you. But then the next question is, how would they be able to legally or technically prevent this?
Maybe they would argue something like what Abraham started to say about government versus assembly, but those are minor things. Not sure.
But I'm asking, how would they be able to legally?
Yeah.
In other words, will they be able to? Let's say you live in Tel Aviv and you run for parliament. Would they be able to arrest you and take you to court and put you to prison because you want to be the president of the common government? Would they have any legal way of doing it? And
I'm not sure. I don't know. They may, but I hope they don't. You know.
Okay, and then the next question is, would they have the technological ability to prevent the election online?
It's a good question. They have the technology, of course, to interfere with everything. But would they use it? Probably they would, but that shouldn't discourage us to try to do it anyway.
Right. And Shlomo, all these questions that you are asking were asked 500 years ago when someone suggested democracy, and all these issues that you're raising, people raised at that time. They say, well, the king is not going to allow it. The king is going to come up with excuses. The king is going to arrest us. The king is going to, and we've done it. They have done it. The only problem is that you did not live 500 years ago. You live now. You were not participating in that process. So this is new to us.
Yeah, okay.
All right, let's go to Shala, and then Harry, and then Sean. You need to unmute, Shala.
Baruch, it's easier. First of all,
Baruch, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. It's a very pleasant surprise for me. When Professor Yosef Agassi asked me to join, to listen, as a good friend, I couldn't refuse, but I was very skeptical. And I really see the vision, and I see the prospects and the possibility. And I don't want to be skeptical, but because the power will come from the moving on. But I must agree with Shlomo, or that it's much more challenging than it seems to be, because you know, it's like with the king, and 500 years ago, at least you would hear a genuine truth answer. And it's very difficult when people don't have the guts to tell you the truth, and they come with fake news or with lies, and and the set of activities that you need the power to cope with. And Israel is a power. When you know only the ammunition, the factory dependence of connecting to other dictatorships and so on, we don't know. It's a competition of time here also, of your project and what's happening around us. And Israel has enough power to block by saying anti-Semitism and getting to the threatened politicians and so on and so on. So it's very challenging. On the other hand, if you do go for factors such as Disneyland and building new neighborhoods and proving people that there is in a practical way that can be moved ahead. And yes, we are interconnected. But you see, a few months ago here in the hospitals, all the doctors, all the Arab doctors in Israel, I'm speaking from Jerusalem, all the Arab doctors and nurses and the workers and the Jewish Arabs, the citizens and the Israelis went out to the verandas and people were cheering to them like in Italy. What a good job you did together. And a few months ago, a Palestinian doctor from Hadassah Hospital was pushed out. Only today they're putting him back, and they saw stories about him and so on. A good doctor that he just gave food to someone, and the examples are irrelevant. What is important that to understand the reality, the challenge. The challenge is to really to stand in front of this, to say the truth about everything, to call things by their true name, and slowly build this partnership on the ground with Palestinians, with Israeli Arabs, with the Jews, with the Jewish diasporas, with the Arab diasporas and Palestinians, and so on. And then anything that you do, like the Disneyland, it will escalate, giving work to some develop young local leadership in Gaza and here and so on. And then if people can see that it's possible, that's what will create the hope itself. But it has to be done with work, not just with research, down on the field work. But I congratulate you for this initiative.
Thank you. So Baruch, let me just reply to you. You said the Israeli government is very powerful. I agree. But there are 9 million Israelis. Not all 9 million Israelis think the same. They're not a monolithic society. I think that you can have few million Israelis and few million Palestinians that can put this thing together. You don't need the Israeli, even despite the government, the Israeli government and the Hamas government and the PA government's potential opposition to this. You can unite reasonable Palestinians and Israelis together to make it happen.
Oh, I surely agree with you. I have experience in this myself. I saw it. I'm optimistic. And on the other hand, the reality of today, really today, yesterday and today. Yesterday, people went out to demonstrate, and it starts with the first thousands. And next week, we'll have a few tens of thousands. So it's not just to make it clear that at the moment, people are already, people now, the things are so, let's say that the system is so corrupted and so controlled that we really have to believe in it. We have to come from a place with not only with a vision, but it's really the intention to do the good that I feel from you. And
Thank you.
People around.
Thank you, Baruch.
That's all.
Thank you. You guys mind if I take 1 minute break? And I'll come back. Just 1 minute break. I'm sorry. I'll be right back.
I was reading in Haaretz that it was actually, they said 20,000 were on the street yesterday.
Yes, they were. and a lot of them were with us together when we were in Balfour for 2 years. And now we have more people in the coalition. It was in a way, it was good what happened yesterday, because you see, if it's only yesterday that it became clear with the appearance of our former Supreme Court Justice, that actually what's happening here. So if, let's say, Yair Lapid and the center would have opposed, and it would be, then they would say, well, it's the Trumpism here, although they are the Trumpists, you see. Netanyahu is the Trumpist, but they would say that, yes, it's like attempt to block, they were elected. But actually, in the country, even now, it's 50-50. And it was just because one leftist party didn't sign with others, and so on and so on. I believe that half the country here want peace and want. But you need to create the conditions, because at the moment we are at the stage, and we still are in this danger that is going to be a dictatorship within 2 weeks, and then it will take us long time to get out of this mess. And it's very realistic estimate that it will happen. Also, it's very realistic that this government will fall in a few months. But also with all the incitement that we have, the division, and to have these people like Ben Gvir and Smotrich and all these people there. Listen, I believe that what happened in Germany, it's question of condition. If you have the right condition, it can happen anywhere. And my parents were in the Holocaust. So we have to be realistic about the situation. I think we have a wonderful young generation. I just continue until Shlomo comes back, to share with you. Okay. So anyway, I'm optimistic, yes.
All right. Thank you. Let's go to Harry Fernley. Hi, Harry.
Hi, thank you for inviting me here. I'm very encouraged what I hear. I want to say first, I'm speaking from England, actually from the United Kingdom. The first part of the United Kingdom was our imperial control of the English imperial control of England, Ireland, and Scotland. As you know, recently we left the European Union, and it's about that I want to talk. You have a model, and say about the European Union, most people will know, I guess, that it grew out of ideas that go way back, at least to the beginning of the last century, the First World War, and developed and then started really solidly in '52 as a commercial enterprise, and grew to become a more political one in more recent years. And to their shame, the British have decided to leave it, and it's that I want to talk about. Had you thought of the wider of using the EU as a model for what you're doing? Basically, because it has a number of, first of all, that the idea you do things in stages. You start off with the low-hanging fruit, which is the easy transfer of certain commercial activities and so on, and building out that way. That the concept of a veto has existed throughout the existence of the European Union, as some important points have always been there. Has there been any detailed academic study of your model by comparison with that of the European Union as it's grown historically?
The answer is no, because the European model is a model of governments creating a common government. It is not.
Sorry, can I interrupt? One of the elements of it is that there are a lot of legislation. I agree in part, but in large part, there is, I've forgotten which one it is now, that actually proposes legislation. This is done essentially by a civil service body, which is now very large, but in consultation, but they have the power, and only that stuff that they propose can be voted on and effectively rejected. Then they're not stupid enough to suggest things that are going to be rejected out of hand by everybody or by a vast majority. So they suffer from very similar constraints to the ones that you're talking about. They are essentially an almost autonomous body. It's not governments getting together, heads of governments, and making decisions like that.
The Israeli and the Palestinian governments are almost enemies of each other, especially Israel and Hamas, and they are enemies. They should be thinking of the European model, but we see the Israeli and the Palestinian governments as a failure. They are they are unable to make peace. But there are a necessary element there because they are powerful. It's different than the situation in Europe. In Europe, there is goodwill on behalf of the people and the governments to create some sort of a system. In Israel, Palestine is one side wants to control another. It's a different fundamental issue, so fundamental start.
I'm not suggesting that you could, in 5 or 10 years, you could achieve, but this happened in Europe only after 2 major world wars. And it started when it started working well on the model of looking what had happened in the League of Nations, then United Nations, and by various other movements, even during the war, they were attempting to find European Union ideas in the air, including Russia at Yalta and so on. But after the war, it really started, in my view, with the European coal and steel community, and it built out from that in true economic contacts and agreements, and it's become much more political. Do you think that's impossible?
I think it's difficult because in Europe, the concept of separation between religion and government is much more acceptable. In Israel, the whole country is based on as a Jewish state, it's based on the creation of a religious state more and more. The elements are opposite of the United States and Europe. The sentiments are for inclusion of religion into the government, not to separate.
Yes, I do understand that, though technically there are only 3 countries in the world. I think there are only 2 that are theocracies. The United Kingdom, technically, the Queen is head of state or king now in all forms, army, head of state and head of religion, as in Iran. And only Saudi Arabia comes close, and of course Israel working close to catch up.
but there is one thing that I am encouraged by what I see in Great Britain, is that if you look at the history, and I'm not a historian, but from what I understand, why does Great Britain have a king or queen? It was basically an agreement to keep the kingdom, the king, keep him intact, but remove all his political powers in order to avoid bloodshed. And so it was an agreement of, and we are proposing something similar to that. We say, the Israelis, you keep your government, Palestinians, you keep your government, but let's have a rational government for everyone. Okay, let's go to Charles, Len, and John.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, while you were away, Baruch and I mentioned that, there were 20,000 people on the street yesterday. And if you think that for each person on the street, there's probably at least 10 more who sympathize but are not marching, or, maybe more.
What streets? What streets are we talking about?
Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, demonstrating against, the latest judicial reforms put forward by Bibi's very right-wing government. So the idea that religion, it would be a non-starter, I think is not true. I mean, just look at Iran. The more dictatorial and more authoritarian a regime has to become to maintain power, the less legitimacy it ultimately has with the people, whether it is based on religion or not. And anyway, I just wanted to point that out.
Yes, and vice versa.
Let's go to Len and then John.
Now, I have kept quiet all day. I've had troubles with my internet, so it's been erratic.
We were waiting for you to be the prime minister. We needed a prime minister.
No, I thought somebody else, but I was having too much trouble with my internet. I don't know what's going on today.
Okay.
I just want to say all these thousands of people out in Tel Aviv in some big square, they're all the anti-democratic Israelis. Israel just went through an election. They had an election. They voted the government they wanted to. That's freedom. That's democracy. And that's the way it's supposed to work. The government hasn't even been signed in. And these poor losers are already out in the street. Well, wait a bit. You know, they're jumping the gun. And as far as how many countries are theocracies, Israel is not going to be a theocracy. That's outlandish. There are numerous theocracies. There are numerous countries. Most of the Arab countries are theocracies, and there are a lot of them. And you have Israel in there as a liberal democracy where Arabs are doing brilliantly in Israel, better than anywhere else in the Arab world. And unfortunately, you've got the PA and Hamas, which are theocracies and are violent, and are Hamas particularly, who's a function of Iran. So I think you guys are being pretty tough on Israel. It's not Israel that's trying to take over. And I will remind you all, and maybe you should take out your notes and check on the San Remo Accords, the League of Nations, and Article 80 of the UN Charter, which states explicitly that every square inch of the British mandate for Palestine is the Jewish homeland. Any land that is given to the Palestinians is by Israel's good graces. And if you don't like it, it's tough. But that's what the law says. That's what the international law says, in spite of all this radical Islamic libel at the United Nations. See you next time.
Okay, so I think that's a good explanation why the EU model is not going to be followed in Israel. Let's go to John and then Shlomo.
Yeah, Joseph, I would imagine at the start of the Confederation, the pervasive use of the veto would be uppermost. And I would wonder if, because of that, there would be a need for some kind of arbitrator to try and get both parties to come to a conclusion, and an agreeable conclusion. Do you think the UN would have a role to play in arbitration?
We have a legislation about that to seek UN recognition.
Okay.
But are you asking, would the UN create this entity? The answer is no. The UN will, in my opinion, the UN will not create this entity. The UN is a body that represents governments, and the UN is, the Israeli government is not going to consider that, nor would the American government. They had plenty of opportunity to create such an entity, but they haven't done it. But we have legislation requiring the UN, or requesting the UN, to accept and to accept us as a member of the UN, or to accept us as an entity. Yes. Okay, let's go to Shlomo.
Yeah, just to respond to Len a little bit, because there was so many distortions and lies. But one major thing, I mean, could they be something more democratic than demonstration of people? The people say what they want beyond what the elected government, so to speak, is doing?
The people just spoke. They had an election. That's the people speaking.
Yeah, but the people speaking more on the streets, those are the real people that's speaking.
No, they're not. They're other people. They can have their opinion, but there was an election.
Yeah, so demonstration is not democratic? What are
No,
you saying?
I love demonstrations, but the fact
Okay.
is, there was an election, and that is the ultimate demonstration.
No, it is not.
Well,
Absolutely not.
Because you're a lefty
Absolutely
and you don't accept it. You don't accept democracy.
No, they accept the democracy, and they, as a part of the democratic process, they demonstrate against something that is, by the
Fine.
way, highly destructive to Israel. If you care for Israel so much, I'm done.
Okay, let me have the concluding remarks. I believe that the Israeli and the Palestinian government is unable to make peace. It's not, it's reality. Democracy is what's needed. It equality, it equals peace. The country of Estonia with 9.5 million people vote online. So online election is a possibility. Want to remind you that Israel and Gaza spend over $100 million a day for a full-fledged war between Gaza and Israel. $100 million could make this government very easily, the elections very easily, and sustain the government for several years. So I'm asking you to share and participate, but I'm calling you to act and write a letter to your paper. Dear, and this is a sample letter that you can send to your paper. And if you want, send me an email. I'll send you the text of this letter. Dear, and you put the name of your newspaper or whatever media you have that you like. I participated in a peace simulation conducted by an organization called the Israeli-Palestinian Confederation. They invite speakers to stress test their formula for peace. Notable people such as Dennis Ross, Peter Beinart, Noam Chomsky, Alan Dershowitz, Cornel West, Gideon Levy, and Aaron David Miller were some of the few who spoke at these events and praised it. The simulations are conducted twice a month on Zoom. I was very skeptical and joined the simulation out of curiosity. I think that line is almost fits Baruch, what Baruch said. I must say that I was surprised. This organization has an intriguing approach to solving the conflict. I urge you to join one of the simulations and provide coverage. Their website is ipconfederation.org, where you could sign up for one of your future events. So send me an email. I'll send you a text of this letter. You can send to whoever you feel can write about it or speak about it and have some publicity given to it. Now, I have to leave, but I am going to keep Dan. If you guys want to continue to have a conversation, then we're going to stop the recording, but you can have the conversation because I have to leave and go visit my son and my grandchildren, and we need to, so I need to leave. So thank you all so much, but you can stay with Dan if you want to discuss further. Thank you. Bye-bye.